Maybe I'll give you my own five. Okay, then I'll probably give you Marley and you can walk her back.
Hello, colleagues, can you hear me? I'm not sure. I've been having some.
Loud and clear.
Yep, we can hear you.
Loud and clear, Julia.
Oh, well, thank you. I am going to start soon. My little fake gavel here. So just want to make sure that everybody who is signed up to speak is here as well. Panelists, okay. All right, right now, for some reason, I still see the backdrop. Is it because we haven't started yet?
Correct, and I'm just waiting for the link to be updated on the website, and then we'll be good to go.
Okay.
So just like 30 more seconds.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I wasn't late to my own party here. Okay. So.
No, not at all. Not at all.
All right.
And Julia, there are a few people in the waiting room. I don't know if they're formal panelists or not, but you might check.
Where's the waiting room?
It's where it says attendees.
Do I let them in one at a time, right?
Well, if they're on your list to testify.
Yeah, they are.
So yeah, you just say like change to panelist. It's a button when you go to their name.
Okay. Thank you. You have a lot of experience doing this.
Way too much experience.
I have an expectation that you're gonna be my, you're gonna let me know. This is my gavel, y'all, okay? I was gonna use a plátano, but then I figured that'd be too much. Okay. It's just us in here, right? Right now, until the rest of the people.
No, it's we've got let's see who's here.
Oh my
Well,
God.
Carrie's trying to have it go up, so in a minute it'll be live streaming.
Okay.
And then I think right now it's well, obviously Caitlin's here.
Okay.
And Neil, and then it's just counselors and staff. Do you know how to see the participants list, Julia?
Yeah, I am. Is it where our chat is? Yeah,
Yes.
I see the participant, I see panelists and attendees list.
Perfect. And if any of those attendees are speaking, you should move them over.
Yes.
And we're live and ready to roll when you are.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So I am ready to, I'm calling this hearing to an order. Just for the record, my name is Julia Mejia, City Councilor at Large, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Small Business and Workforce Development. We are joined today by the sponsor of this docket, Councillor Flaherty at Large, Councillor Flynn of District 2, and Councillor O'Malley of District 6. And we're also going to recognize my colleagues, councilors, in the order of arrival. And that order of arrival is, I would need some, okay, here we go. I have an assistant who's helping me with this, so give me a minute. We have order of arrival, Councilor at Large, Councilor Asabi George, Councilor Bob from District 2, Councilor Breeden, and I'm gonna need my assistant to name the districts because I don't know everybody's district by heart. I know I should be ashamed of myself. Councilor Bach is from District 8, Councilor Breeden is from District 9, and I believe those, and that's it for now.
Councillor Flynn and O'Malley, I see as well.
Yeah, so they are the sponsors of this, that we are joined by the sponsor of this docket, which I've already announced, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Flynn of District 2, and Councilor O'Malley of District 6. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/citycounciltv. It will be rebroadcasted on Comcast Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, Verizon Channel 1964. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email rob.cobb@boston.gov for the link. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation/residency and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. You may also submit written testimony by emailing ccc@sbwd@boston.gov. Today's hearing is on docket 0663, order for a hearing to discuss the impact of delivery commission fees on restaurants during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our expected speakers today include Caitlin Pisafaro, Director of Policy for the Office of Economic Development, Stephen Gilman, Director of Main Streets, John Scala, and I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly, but you will let me know when it's your turn to speak, owner of El Jefe Restaurant, and Amy Healy, Head of Government Affairs for Grubhub. I also have been informed that Bob Luce, President and CEO of MA Restaurant Association, and Stephen Clark, VP of Government Relations for the MA Restaurant Association, will be joining us later on. A representative from Grubhub also sent along a written testimony which will be entered into the record. I now will recognize the docket sponsors for opening statements before turning this over to our panelists. Councilor Flaherty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting the hearing. Pretty self-explanatory from my perspective. We're in a pandemic. A lot of folks are struggling, and a lot of folks need food out there. Our restaurants and service industry probably one of the hardest hit, and looking to craft a solution here. I know our delivery services and venues have also suffered as well, just because the volume is down as well. So my hope is through this hearing, the stakeholders from the restaurant industry, stakeholders from the delivery industry will get in a room, try to figure this out, make some sense. The complaints have been that folks are feeling that while everyone is supposed to be sharing, I guess, and absorbing some of the sacrifice, they felt that the delivery fees were a little bit on the high to exorbitant side, and felt that as a matter of basic fairness, we should have some type of uniform fee system for delivering meals. So we've all seen it firsthand. We've all reached out to our local businesses to see and to ask them to help with our senior centers, with public housing, etc. And they've been great, despite the fact that they've been taking a big hit here. They've also been preparing meals and helping and throwing a shoulder into the community piece of it. And I think to some degree our delivery folks have as well. Maybe that message is not getting out there, but we have been seeing some high fees, and our hope is that we'll have some type of sensible fair, reasonable fee structure that everyone kind of gives a little bit, takes a little bit, despite, obviously because of what we find ourselves in, which is we're in the middle of a pandemic. So it's space that, we probably, quite frankly, shouldn't necessarily be in, but it's important to at least be the conveners, get the stakeholders on the phone, reach out to our administration folks, Caitlin and others, to make some sense of this, and moving forward, see if we can put something in place that
I'm not sure if we've experienced technical difficulty. Councillor Flaherty, are you there? Just by a show of hands, my colleagues, can you hear me? Okay. I believe we lost Councillor Flaherty. If you can find your way back, we have lost you. We have lost your audio. Okay, we can go back to you, Councillor Flaherty, when I'm going to move on to Councillor Flynn. Opening remarks. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for chairing this important meeting. Thank you to Councilor O'Malley, and thank you as well to Councilor Flaherty for their leadership on this important issue. Thank you for the administration, Walsh administration, for being here, restaurant owners, and for the delivery companies as well. Restaurant owners have informed me that the delivery companies charge upwards of 25-35% commission fees on deliveries. Some have told me they currently pay hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on these third-party commission fees. With the COVID-19 crisis and need for physical distancing, most sales of restaurants are now through deliveries. As a result, restaurants are paying a significantly larger portion of their revenues for commissions to the delivery companies, which is a huge burden, especially when their sales are already down, and they are even more reliant on delivery to help them try and survive this crisis. These high commission fees can wipe out restaurants' revenue margins and their ability to retain or rehire staff moving forward. Other cities have made caps on what these commission fees can do. 15% in San Francisco. New York is considering it, as well as Baltimore. Cambridge proposing a 10% fee on a 10% cap. Basically, my point is, we're in a pandemic, we're in an economic recession. I'm asking the delivery companies to be reasonable. They haven't been reasonable. They're not being a good neighbor. Our restaurants employ people in our neighborhoods. They're cooks, they're waitresses, they clean the tables. They make a wage for their family so that they can pay bills. We don't need delivery companies paying outrageous fees, especially during difficult times. When someone's down on their luck, they're on the ground, you offer a helping hand. You offer a helping hand to have them get back up on their feet so that they continue to work hard, pay their bills, pay their taxes, and employ their workers. We don't want to put restaurants out of businesses. When you're charging 40%, 50% fees, that's outrageous. And I'm not happy about it. And you need to be a better neighbor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now I'm going to move on to Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for hosting. Is this your first? Is this the first time chairing this committee?
This is my first. Yes, this is my first ever hearing that I am responsible for. So
Well,
yeah,
you're doing a great job, and congratulations. It's keep it up. You're doing great. Thank you, of course, to the at-large councillor and the district councillor from South Boston, Councillor Flynn, for their great partnership, and to all my colleagues. I believe everyone signed on to this. This is an incredibly important issue, and I share the frustration that the two prior speakers spoke about in referencing to the third-party delivery companies. I know that some are joining us today, and I do appreciate that. Obviously, we invited everyone, and not everyone will participate. But just as a quick primer for folks, most restaurants that do a high volume of delivery have in-staff delivery people. So I'm talking about a local pizza joint or a Chinese food restaurant that does a lot of takeout service. They would have staff that would do the delivery, and you'd call up or sometimes use a web portal, make an order, have it delivered, and that person would be an hourly employee. Frustration that the two prior speakers spoke about. There are other, if everyone could just mute themselves, because I'm getting feedback of myself, and while I love to hear myself speak, I don't think everyone else would like to hear it twice. Thank you. There are other restaurants that typically don't do as much takeout service, so they would partner with a third-party vendor to help deliver their food to customers. And that's a great use of the innovation technology, and I celebrate it. I have used DoorDash and Uber Eats and Postmates and Grubhub before. And let's be clear, there are 4 companies that account for 99% of all business. So while it's not quite a monopoly, there are 4 companies that are almost all of these third-party delivery fees and delivery services. And the fees that they charge are significantly higher. While we can't pin down an exact amount, and it's unlikely that they will tell us what their exact amount is, it's typically between 20 and 30% of a delivery fee, of a processing fee. These vendors also provide some web search optimization, some PR, some other things, but we're talking specifically about the delivery component as it relates right now. So if you're a restaurant that typically has more front of service, sit down clients, you may have decided to use one of these vendors to help deliver food to more customers as a means of growing your brand, of getting your food to more people, and you'll happily take the haircut knowing that you'll make up for the profit otherwise, typically with sit-down service. Well, here we are on week 8 of no sit-down service in the Commonwealth, and you have restaurants who are just getting absolutely killed by these high fees using these vendors. So while there's been some encouraging talk by some of these vendors and some of these companies to voluntarily cut their commission rates and their delivery rates and the high percentage fees that these small businesses are paying, there hasn't been enough. So it's been cities and states that have really led the work in this space. And I've been really gratified to hear good news out of New York. Our neighbor across the Charles River, Cambridge, has done stuff. Countless restaurants in California and other states around the country have been doing this. So it is high time that Boston does the same. If you're a small restaurateur and you utilize a third-party delivery fee, you may have to close because the cost of doing business, the high cost associated with these, can't outweigh the fact that there's not enough pickup service for your takeout service at the window. And given the fraught economic climate that we are in, given the fact that the Mass Restaurant Association predicts that possibly 40% or more of existing restaurants could not reopen when we return some semblance to normalcy, we need to act now. These 4 companies need to have their rates capped. We need to support the small businesses so that they can survive during these terrible times, so that they aren't forced to either lose business, lose profit, or pass that added cost on to the consumer. The 4 big vendors, the 4 big third-party vendors are doing well, and good for them. They saw an opportunity to create a business model that was needed then, and it's obviously needed even more now. They have got a windfall unlike anything perhaps they could even imagine in their wildest dreams. We want to make sure that they are able to take the enormous profits that they have, pay their contractors well, make sure that they have plenty of PPE and support, but they also need to be sensitive to the fact that these restaurants are hemorrhaging money and they need to do their part to address it. And if they don't, we're going to set up a cap system that forces them to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor O'Malley. I also would like to just acknowledge that we have been joined by Council President Janie of District 7, who will let you know whenever you step foot in her district. And so I'm going to move on now. I want to give an opportunity to my colleagues to see if they have any opening remarks that they'd like to share. In the order of arrival, we have At-Large Councillor Asabi George, followed by Councillor Bach, Councillor Breeden, and Councillor Janey. So Councillor At-Large Asabi George, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the makers for this. As a small business owner, coming live from my small business that's currently shut down, the impact that these charges have on food businesses, and I'm not a food business, is certainly tremendous. And we've seen all of the reports, and we've certainly heard from our local restaurants in particular about this impact. So happy to be here, happy to support this effort, and look forward to hearing from both business owners and the administration on the efforts that we can do to protect our small businesses. Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you to the makers for this.
Thank you, Councillor Sabi George. I'm going to move on to Councillor Bach. You have now the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Yeah, I also just want to commend the makers. You know, I think that the whole structure of this business wasn't set up for this to be the only business that our restaurants are able to do, and we really need to think about accommodations. And I know that the delivery companies, you know, they are a really critical part of this infrastructure. I can't imagine if we were 10 years earlier and facing this crisis. But I think we can simultaneously recognize their importance and also recognize that they benefit, as we all do, from a robust small business restaurant economy being able to come out the other side of this thing. So really looking forward to the conversation today. I just want to highlight, based on some written testimony that one of my constituents has submitted, David Chow, he's the founder of Benson AI. I just wanted to highlight a separate issue from the question of how much people charge is transparency around how much people charge. I think a lot of consumers think that the delivery fee they're paying is the amount of the fee that's going to these various companies, when in fact there's a substantial cut behind the scenes. And I think that in terms of things that we could do to make this better, one piece is definitely, you know, how to limit those fees. And another piece is providing that transparency in pricing, where we let consumers know how much of their money when they're making a purchase is going to the delivery company versus to the restaurant, and help them make fully informed choices on how to support our restaurants. So thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I look forward to the hearing.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm back on, Council Flaherty, but just continue on.
Sure. I'm going to continue on, and then I'll end with you, Councilor Flaherty. Is that okay?
No, that's okay. I've completed my testimony. I mean, I just wanted to offer opening comments. That's all, which we did. You got enough of it in. I want to get right into the testimony as soon as our colleagues get a chance to do a quick intro, but look forward to hearing from the panelists.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Councilor Breeden, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. District 9 has a huge number of small family-owned businesses. A lot of them are takeout, small restaurants owned by immigrants. And even before this COVID crisis, the fees, the commissions charged by delivery companies were a concern even before this crisis. So I really feel that this is a very important discussion to have, and I look forward to hearing the testimony from the various parties. And I look forward to getting to a place that would have a more fair and equitable approach to delivery fees in our neighborhoods. Our restaurants are such an important part of our fabric, and there's so many of our restaurants are struggling right now, and I think this is an opportune time to try and address this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Breeden. Now I'd like to recognize President Council Kim Janey from District 7. You now have the floor. If you are here with us still. Councilor Janey, are you still with us? I see you.
Yeah.
You oh, you can unmute yourself, please.
Hey, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. I think this is a really important discussion, and it's one that I think is particularly impacting us around food access during COVID. From my own personal experience, I haven't had any experience with these food apps until COVID. Just the difficulty of getting food, not having a car, the challenges that I have in the supermarkets, trying to get delivery anyway, I've, opened up to using them as a way of supporting some of the local businesses that were still open in my district. But it is incredibly expensive. So right now, it's like once a week that I probably will get one of these, and it's incredibly expensive. It's like $30, $40. And I'm just one individual, and I can't imagine if someone is trying to be a family using these apps. So I just think it's an important conversation, and I'm looking forward to listening and learning more about how we may influence this so that it's more affordable for folks, because I do think there's a place for this industry, but I want to make sure that it doesn't hurt other deliveries that happen, as well as be too out of reach for folks. So again, I just want to sit back and learn and listen, and I appreciate everything. And I want to thank the maker, Matt, for bringing this forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Council Janey. So I'm going to move on now to our guests, our speakers for today. We're going to start off with Caitlin Pasafaro from the Office of Economic Development. You now have the floor.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Mejia, sponsors Flynn, Flaherty, and O'Malley, and Councilors Bach, Asabi George, Breeden, and President Janey. My name is Caitlin Pasafaro, and I am Director of Policy for the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. Thank you for having me today. Before I discuss the hearing order, I would be remiss if I did not reiterate the message you have continuously heard from Mayor Walsh about the importance of our small business community. Small businesses are the heart of Boston's economy, providing 170,000 jobs and generating $15 billion in annual revenue. More than that, they are a vital part of the culture and uniqueness of each of our neighborhoods. Their impact on the quality of life for our residents cannot be overstated. It is for this reason why the mayor has prioritized small businesses in our COVID-19 policies to date, and why they continue to be a focal point in our recovery and reopening efforts moving forward. As you know, since the start of the public health emergency, the Office of Economic Development has stayed in constant contact with small businesses through weekly calls and virtual office hours. We've conducted regular surveys, so we've been able to modify our support based on responses. We've published several documents, including the Financial Relief Handbook, an Unemployment Insurance Guide, and Open Boston Restaurants, which is a public-facing database listing which restaurants are open for takeout and delivery service. We are also working on designing more virtual workshops to assist businesses and share new COVID-specific guidance. Lastly, as you know, as of May 12th, we have dispersed 559 grants to small businesses through our Small Business Relief Fund. And just last week, Mayor Walsh announced an additional $5.5 million to fully fund all the remaining eligible grant requests. We are working with small businesses to get these checks issued. Through our communications with restaurants, we have repeatedly heard that third-party delivery fees are becoming increasingly burdensome. Due to the heavy reliance on deliveries since Governor Baker's March 23rd essential business order, these fees now threaten to wipe out a restaurant's entire profit margin. This is unacceptable. During this uncertain time, we must use every tool available to support the economic vitality of our small businesses, many of which are restaurants. Therefore, we believe that having reasonable caps in place will help to ensure that it is financially feasible for our restaurants to remain open despite the closure of on-site dining services. This will continue to be essential as the economy is reopened in a phased process. As you know, and as many of you referenced, several cities across the country have taken measures to cap the fees, and we are reviewing these to understand best practices for Boston. Over the last several weeks, the Office of Economic Development, along with the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics, has had conversations with the 4 platforms that conduct the vast majority of delivery services in Boston. As previously mentioned, those are Grubhub, Uber Eats, Postmates, and DoorDash. It is our hope that these conversations will materialize into a reduction of commissions in Boston. In lieu of a voluntary agreement in the near future, we stand ready to work with the council to explore other mechanisms to achieve our goal. We certainly share your sense of urgency and intend to move swiftly. I want to again thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak. I'm available to answer any questions and also look forward to listening to the remaining presenters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I'm going to move on now to John Skahal. you will correct me once you are here. You are the owner of El Jefe restaurant. That I knew how to say. El Jefe restaurant. John, if you now have the floor.
Thank you very much. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
All right, it's John Shaw.
Shaw.
Shaw, right, just like what you wrap around your shoulders.
All right.
Thank you very much for letting me testify at this really important hearing today. I'm the owner of El Jefe's Taqueria. It's in Harvard Square in Cambridge. I'm also the owner of El Jefe's Taqueria of Boston Common, which is in the little building at Emerson College on the corner of Tremont and Boylston Street. That restaurant is completely finished and will open when this crisis sort of gets a little more under control. So up until March 16th, the percent of my sales that were delivery sales were approximately 25%. And this was taking at an average of 25% of those sales went to the for delivery companies. About 7 to 8% of my total revenue was going to the delivery company sales, to the delivery company services. After March 16th, my delivery sales are now about 72% of my total sales. And in the 8 weeks since March 16th through Mother's Day, I've paid the delivery companies approximately $86,000 between my 2 restaurants, the one in Harvard Square and the one in Bethlehem, and both about roughly the same. I've lost money during those 8 weeks, but the delivery companies have made $86,000 off me. And the issue here is this was a problem before this crisis hit. When I was paying 8% of my total revenue, that's like paying a second rent, right? It was still a sort of a huge part of my cost structure was the fees going to the delivery companies. After this crisis hit, it's now 18, 19% of my total delivery. When my total revenue, when restaurants operate on 6-8% profit margins, when you're paying 18% of your total revenue to the delivery companies, you're just not viable. It's no longer a sort of a viable business model. Now, and the issue is that whatever the new normal is going to be coming out of this pandemic, takeout and delivery are going to be an increased percentage of restaurants' revenue. And that's across the board. Even restaurants that weren't doing delivery are going to have to do delivery now because the amount of in-house seating they're going to do is going to be dramatically reduced. All of the sort of the COVID-19 health restrictions that are going to be implemented in sit-down dining restaurants are going to reduce restaurant capacity. And the only way restaurants are going to be able to make up for that is by increasing takeout and delivery. And so this problem isn't going to go away when restaurants reopen for sit-down dining. It is going to continue. And if it's not addressed, not just during the pandemic, but addressed permanently, there will be another whole second wave of restaurant closures with thousands in Boston and literally millions more in the country of restaurant workers that lose jobs. And so that this issue sort of gets addressed. And at some point in this panel, I would also like to talk about sort of how it came to be that the delivery companies decided that restaurants could sort of handle 25 or 30% delivery fees, because that was an explicit part of their original business model, was to make restaurants pay 25 or 30%. And they thought restaurants wouldn't mind carrying that load at all. And there's a whole rationale they had for that, which was wrong at the time. It makes like absolutely no sense anymore when delivery sales are as large a percentage of total restaurant sales as they are now and as they will be going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John, for your testimony. We really do appreciate it. I am going to move on to Amy Healy, who is the head of governmental affairs at Grubhub. Amy, you now have the floor.
Good afternoon, dear Councillor Mia and members of the Small Business and Workforce Committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. Again, my name is Amy Healy and I'm the head of public affairs for Grubhub. Grubhub is a leading online and mobile food ordering and delivery marketplace with the largest network of restaurant partners, as well as 24 million active diners. I'm here today to express Grubhub's strong opposition to the concept of a government-imposed cap on fees paid by restaurants for delivery and marketing services. Any cap on fees, regardless of the duration, will result in damaging unintended consequences for locally owned businesses, as we've already seen in other markets, and unintended consequences for delivery workers, diners, and the local economy. In fact, it will result in the exact opposite of what the legislation is designed to accomplish. And we believe that any cap on fees represents an overstep by local officials and will not withstand a legal challenge. On the face of it, a cap on fees seems like an easy solution to help restaurants that are struggling. And there's nothing we want more than to ensure the health of independent restaurants. We don't have a business without them. That's why during COVID, Grubhub has spent tens of millions of dollars directly to benefit restaurants. We have supported millions of dollars worth of meals and cash donations to organizations including hospitals and frontline healthcare workers throughout the country. We've also donated millions of dollars through our Grubhub Community Relief Fund. And most recently, we just donated $1.25 million to the Boston-based Restaurant Strong Fund. So we believe in supporting our restaurants, but this solution is exactly the wrong thing to do. In reality, a cap will lower order volume to locally owned restaurants, increase costs and headaches for small business owners, and raise costs to customers. Our delivery workers who are currently relying on us to earn an income, including 100% of tips from diners, would have fewer work opportunities and lower earnings. In the middle of what is quickly becoming one of the worst economic downturns in a century, Grubhub is ensuring that workers in Boston can continue to provide for themselves and their families. Grubhub is neither a public utility nor simply a delivery service. In the simplest of terms, Grubhub is a marketing engine and an order generation business. We connect hungry diners to great local restaurants. The platform is free for anyone who chooses to join, and Grubhub offers a fee-for-service model, meaning restaurant owners select the services they want and only pay when Grubhub generates a sale. Restaurants have options to drive businesses besides third-party marketplaces, none of which are seeing their fees regulated. Why not cap how much marketing platforms can charge and restaurants can spend on other services like Google or Facebook ads or Yelp or Yellow Pages or newspaper, radio, or billboard? Restaurant owners should make their own decisions about where they want to market and how much they want to spend on these channels. While the largest of national chains can afford these new expenses, small and independent restaurants cannot, even in the best of times. They'll either shut their doors or shift additional costs onto customers, making them even less competitive against other businesses. There's the popular and completely false belief that third-party marketing and delivery services would still make a profit, let alone significant profits, with the proposed fee caps. In fact, these caps would force us to exit certain markets and or suffer substantial losses that threaten the sustainability of our business. Grubhub is a publicly traded company, and we announced our Q1 earnings last week. Yes, Grubhub reported an increase in revenues, but we also recorded an increase in costs, resulting in us making about 1%, not the 30% that people like to communicate out in the media. You have my full testimony, and I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I'd be happy to answer any questions that any members, any counselors may have.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Healy, for your testimony. Just for the record, my last name is Mejia. I know I butcher everybody else's name, and I'm learning how to help people with right pronunciations. So I'm gonna move on now to, I understand that my colleague, Councillor Campbell from District 4 is in the waiting room. So if someone can let her in, that would be great. And if that's something that I can do, I will figure it out. But if someone could let Councillor Campbell in, I would really appreciate it. Thank you, and say your name right. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my colleagues and councillors, just to be super mindful. We're trying to keep our hearings under within a reasonable time frame. So we're going to be allotting a 5-minute opportunity for questions. I will be timing you. I won't be as fierce as Councillor Bach, but I will try to emulate her fierceness. And in the order of arrival, I'm going to start off with first Councillor Flaherty. You now have the floor.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, is this something the administration is interested in pursuing at the moment? And if so, as mentioned in my opening statements, you know, or at least before I got cut off, I was about to say that New York recently passed the 15% cap. Their local bill enables corporate council to enforce the city's corporation council to enforce the regulation. Is this something that may work for us? And also, I guess the delivery service, there's a lot of back and forth around sort of flat/arbitrary cap on commissions. And I guess, would this be something that the businesses would be interested in, and/or, you know, some other partnership or arrangement with the restaurants? And to the delivery folks, can you explain the full fee structure in terms of how the commission works, how the marketing fee works, how the credit card processing fee works? I guess how much is taken out of sort of every dollar for the delivery? Maybe give us some insight as to sort of, you know, the decisions that are being made from the delivery company's end. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Before we move on, I wanted to give my colleague, Councillor Campbell, an opportunity to make opening remarks, if that's okay with my colleagues. I don't know if this is out of order, but I'm the chair and I'm going to utilize my power to give my colleague, Councillor Campbell, an opportunity to say some opening remarks.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Madam Chair, and congrats on your hearing. Just because obviously I was had a conflict, so I joined late. Just thank you to the makers for bringing up this important conversation. It's something obviously we hear from constituents, not just with respect to restaurants, but across all different platforms where you have to buy things online these days. You're seeing prices go up on products and services. So this is an important conversation. Look forward to hearing more and continuing the conversation. So I'll just thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to now ask Councillor Flynn for questions and wondering.
Madam Chair, I still haven't got my questions answered. Those were my questions.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, you know, Councillor Flaherty and answers to his questions, please.
Councillor, in terms, this is Caitlin. In terms of your first question, yes, I mean, absolutely. I think this is something we, you know, as I said in my opening remarks, want to, you know, work with the council and hopefully the platforms as well. You know, I mentioned that we have had some conversations, you know, to a varying degree of productivity with each platform. And I think our, you know, our hope is that we can always build consensus around something as opposed to having to mandate it. But I think if we're unable to get folks to the table, that's certainly an option that we're willing to explore. So, you know, absolutely here to you know, to continue the conversations with you all, if that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you, Caitlin. And then obviously the next question, the two next questions to the delivery service in terms of there's sort of an arbitrary cap out of New York. I want to get their thoughts on it, but also wanted to get a little insight in terms of how the fee structure works, the commission fee, and the other fees that I had referenced in earlier in the call with respect to every dollar gets broken up, I assume, and if so, how?
Sure. Counselor, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great, thank you. Happy to talk about that. So delivery is one component of our business, right? So we would charge 10% to a restaurant to deliver. So on a $30 order, $3 would go to the driver. Clearly, that is not enough to pay drivers, especially now. They're on the front lines of delivering meals. So the diner also pays a portion of that. And 100% of the tip also goes to the driver. So there's, there's dialogue about, oh, we're taking all these fees. We have to pay these drivers. This is, we're paying PPE for these drivers. Our costs, we're a public company. We lost money last quarter. Our costs went up. Yes, revenues went up because of the additional costs related to protecting our drivers, protecting the platform, and putting more money into restaurants. So you have that part of the fee. And then you have the marketing that we do for restaurants. And you mentioned credit cards. The other day I ordered from a non-Grubhub restaurant and my credit card number was written on the bag along with my name and address. That's not okay. As a consumer, that's not something that they're gonna put up with. And so using a platform allows Grubhub with our technology to make sure that those transactions are protected. We lose, I was told, around $10 million a year in credit card fraud. That's $10 million that we ate that the restaurant did not have to eat. So if there's credit card fraud through our platform, Grubhub and our fraud team and our customer service team manages that. And so the restaurant doesn't have to. We also pay for background checks for our drivers. Those are expensive. And of course, 24/7 customer service. In addition, the marketing is so we can drive orders to restaurants. Many restaurants have chosen to use us to do their marketing. And a big partner of ours, our largest vendor, is Google. So if you tell us, we can't charge X, we have no choice but to pay Google. So we have hard costs. This is, I keep hearing that 30% fee thrown around as if that's 30% profit. And that is not true. We've got hard costs for all those areas that I just mentioned. And then the marketing commission is a sliding scale of services. So restaurants can choose to do promotions. They may choose to offer, $10 off, trying out new menu items, and we facilitate that for them. So I hope I'm answering your question, but there's a menu of services that restaurants choose when they decide to work with us. And I'd also like to point out that we provide, if a lead goes straight to the restaurant's website, we will provide a free widget that provides an e-commerce functionality so that they can have that order fulfilled by us. And that's free to restaurants to use. But when we generate the lead through our marketing, then that's when a commission fee is applied.
Very good. That's helpful. And obviously I understand that there's some cost and fees and sort of, happening that you guys incur. And then lastly, just the folks that have been reaching out to my office, they're asking to see if we could mandate transparency in the pricing so that the restaurants can share, where the revenue is growing towards the restaurant. A lot of folks are blaming the restaurant for the delivery fee, if you will, because that's obviously added on top of the food. So they're just hoping to be able to maybe get some partnership there where they can at least break down that delivery fee so that it's fully transparent. Folks know what the restaurant's getting for the food, and then folks know what the delivery company's getting for the delivery. And then you're backing out clearly the credit card fee, all the fees that we had referenced.
Right. And our relationship with the restaurant, those fees are fully transparent. Our contract is very simple and clear. I think it's about 2 pages. And the fees to the diner are also very transparent. Clearly, restaurants don't have to use us to do delivery. They can hire their own delivery person. We have restaurants tell us all the time it's too expensive. They don't want to do the background check. They don't want to pay the insurance. They don't want to reimburse for gas. And sometimes they've got a delivery person and maybe they don't have very many deliveries. So that's a choice that the restaurant makes to use us for delivery or hire their own person. So that is a cost the restaurant's going to incur if they want to provide delivery. Either they pay us or they pay their own.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to really start using my timer. I said that I was, but the next person up is Councillor Flynn. You now have the floor and you have 5 minutes, and I'm going to start now. So you're ready to go.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And my questions are similar to the ones asked by Councilor Flaherty. But let me give a comment and then a question. During this economic recession, we all know restaurants are hurting financially, and they're on the ground and they're struggling to get back up. And it's our job to be helpful to them. They're part of our community. The restaurant workers coach Little League, and they're school teachers, they're part-time workers, and they work hard to pay bills and support their families. Why is it necessary for these third-party companies to charge these outrageous fees, 30%, 40%, especially during a time of economic difficulty, during a pandemic? But the last thing I would ever want to do is try to exploit a situation to make money off someone during these times. I hope the delivery companies can understand that we're upset about that, because these restaurants play an integral part in our community, and they hire a lot of workers and they do a tremendous job. And for you to charge 30, 40%, it's outrageous.
I'm happy to respond.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I would like for you to respond to that. That would be great. Thank you.
Sure. And thank you, Councillor Flynn. Again, these are costs that we incur. We are charged. We have to pay our drivers. We have to pay insurance. We have to pay for marketing. We lost money in the last quarter, and we issued our earnings last week where we said all of our profits would be going back into the business to support restaurants. So we made that public declaration last week. And I'm happy to share more about that. I can send that follow-up documentation to you.
So when other cities enacted a cap, New York City and several cities in California, are these the same third-party delivery companies that are here in Boston as well?
Yes, and I can share what some internal analysis that we've done about the impact of those caps. Again, we have costs. We have to pay Google. We can't just say, well, the city of San Francisco imposed a cap on us, and Google's going to say, okay, well, you don't have to pay us this month. That's just not how it works. So there have been several changes happening in Boston. Prices have gone up on diners. So when there's an increase in price, then people order less. When they order less, that's less orders to restaurants, and that's fewer opportunities for drivers to make money. And we know with higher diner fees comes a decrease in tips. So if a diner is paying more to order food, they're not feeling as generous with our drivers. So there's a real impact to this. We also saw some of the third-party companies pulling out of certain neighborhoods, saying, well, it's just not profitable for us to operate in a certain neighborhood. And so they just cut off service to certain neighborhoods. So these companies are making business decisions that in response to these fees caps. And so it's increasing costs on everyone. Everyone's losing. The drivers are losing, the restaurants are losing, and we're losing.
If it's good enough for cities in New York or San Francisco or Cambridge or other cities, it's good enough should be good enough for us here as well. We want to support our restaurants, our small businesses, our waitresses and waiters. They need a hand up, especially during this difficult time. That's why we're requesting you to be a better neighbor to the residents of Boston, because it doesn't seem to me like you are being a good neighbor.
Well, I'd certainly appreciate the opportunity to continue this dialogue. I know this was the first hearing we're having, and I found that the more I talk to, we've had instances where city councils haven't even responded to our request to comment to learn more about how the industry works. They're reading that, again, 30% fee, 30% profit. Those are costs that we incur to pay these drivers to do background checks, to provide PPE, insurance, customer service. Those are real costs. And like I said, Google is not letting us off the hook when we provide marketing services for restaurants. And again, I'm happy to also share some of the information about the tens of millions of dollars that we're providing in support, because that's important. We don't have a business without independent restaurants. We have no incentive to see them go out of business. Quite the contrary.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilor Mejia. And just for the record, prior to this meeting, I did have the opportunity to talk to several third-party delivery companies to learn as much as I could about the fees. I also had the opportunity to speak to many restaurant owners, including John here several times, and others as well. So I tried to learn as much as I could about this important issue. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I'd like to now recognize Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Ms. Healy, and thank you, Mr. Shull, for your testimony. I see my friend David Doyle has joined us as well. We can hear from him during public testimony, a great restaurateur who's got some wonderful places in JP. Ms. Healy, I appreciate you being here. I have a couple of questions for you specifically. One, what is the difference between a delivery fee and a service fee?
The delivery fee to the restaurant?
Yes.
So we charge restaurants a 10% delivery fee.
And what's the service fee?
We charge diners a service fee.
Okay. And what is so it's a 10% delivery fee. What's the percentage for the service fee?
I don't have the exact percentage off the top of my head. And also I would like to say, we are a public company and my competitors are probably, reviewing this call as well. So I'll do my best to be transparent with that understanding.
Understood, and I will give you credit for being here. Again, your competitors were invited, so we appreciate that you're being here. But that's just so the delivery fee goes to the restaurant, and then the service fee, the delivery fee you will share with is 10%. The service fee, which you will not share the percentage because it's proprietary and the competitors are watching, that is incurred by the customer. So if I'm at home and I order from John's restaurant, he will absorb the cost for the delivery fee and I'll absorb the cost for the service fee. Correct?
So let me start by, let's break it up between diner facing and restaurant facing fees. So the restaurant pays a 10% fee and the diner pays a 10% fee because you have to pay the delivery worker. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We can all agree that the delivery worker deserves to get paid.
Of course. What do your delivery workers, what is the starting salary for a delivery worker for your company?
Delivery workers are independent contractors for the most part. We do have some employees and they're making, I think they're making in the mid $20 range right now on average.
Does that include tips or does that exclude tips?
That includes tips.
That includes tips. Did your company ever engage in the practice of using tips to subsidize the delivery workers' base pay?
100% of our tips have always gone to the driver.
Okay, that is, there are some media reports that of your competitors, to be fair, not you, your competitors were brought up on that as recently as last July, that they weren't giving 100% of their tips to their workers.
Right, no, there have been ordinances that call for that we fully support.
Okay, well, it's good. It's always good to find common ground. You mentioned your competitors. Is it true that Uber is in talks to merge with Grubhub or to buy Grubhub, I should say?
Listen, I'm in government affairs. You read what I read. I can't comment on that.
All right. If that were to be the case, the merger of those two companies, you'd have one company that would control 55% of the marketplace.
I read that in media reports.
Okay. So there was a recent New York Times article that sort of broke down the cost of a meal, the delivery fee, the service fee, the sales tax, and the total and what the markup was. And for one very specific thing, and if I go over my time, Madam Chair, I can return to this in a second, but just briefly, this was a Panda Express order, family feast, which cost about $47.10. Delivery fee for Grubhub was $149, service fee was $471, sales tax $461, total is $57.91. That's a markup of 37%. Again, to your credit, that's actually better among the big four. DoorDash had a 47% markup, Postmates had a 45% markup, Uber Eats had a 49% markup. Now, recently,
Sales tax, I mean, that's your department. That's your department, not mine.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, restaurants would love to see their, we talk to restaurants all the time, and they tell us that city regulations, high rents, especially in a city like Boston and New York and San Francisco, arbitrary fines, surprise inspections.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off because this has nothing to do with the topic that we're talking about right now, and it's a little offensive to try to redirect the conversation. There was a post recently that went viral. It wasn't a Boston restaurant, it was a Chicago restaurant. I'm sure you've seen it. It was a pizzeria that detailed what their deposits look like. They use you as their vendor. They use Grubhub, perhaps others, but this is the Grubhub sort of summary of March deposits, which had 46 prepaid orders, totaling $1,042.63. There was a $206 commission, $94.99 delivery commission, $38.52 processing fee, $231 in promotions. The restaurateur for 46 hours, which totaled over $1,000, was able to take $376.54. He said it was almost enough money to cover the cost of the food, not even talking about the labor and everything else. Now, admittedly, your company does more than just deliver. You already you've even go to Google several times, although I really don't care about Google's bottom line. You talk about different marketing services. This restaurateur did use some of the more Cadillac versions of the marketing services, but still, how can you square the fact that for $1,000 plus worth of orders, this individual was only able to take in $376?
That particular restaurateur chose to do those promotions. He chose to run specials through the platform. We did not impose those fees on him. He decided to run a special. That was his choice. It's just as if you would give a 50% coupon in Valpak.
The promotions total, the promotions total $231. So let's put that all back. He's still looking at a nearly 50% loss of revenue.
I don't have that particular invoice. This was a series of promotions. I know it was over $230 to promote his restaurant.
$231.
He also offered just discounts off orders and $7 off for first-time customers. So he chose to opt in to a lot of different promotions, not just that $230 line you're looking at. That's an extreme outlier. And again, there have been subsequent media reports that reviewed that more closely and showed that this particular restaurant chose to do that. I mean, if a restaurant wants to run a 50% off coupon in Valpak or a promotion, they can do that. I mean, that's their choice.
That's great.
Thank you. I'm going to interject here just in the interest of time and giving an opportunity to my colleagues to continue. Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. We'll come back around to you. And I have just been notified by the President Council, Janie, that she will need to leave a little bit earlier. So I am going to ask my colleagues to forgive me for bumping her up in the line of questioning. But in the interest of time and making sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak, I am going to ask Council President Janie that you now have the floor.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation and wanted to follow up on some of the questioning of my colleague, Councillor Matt O'Malley, in terms of pay, understanding that these are independent contractors, not employees per se. What is the starting base pay, not including tips? I'm sorry, is there a mute issue? Am I on mute? No, I'm not on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think that was my fault.
For you.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry. I want to direct that question specifically to the person representing Grubhub, but anyone could take that if there are other. I know there are other representatives did not show. So I'd be interested for your company. Yes, the starting base pay.
They get 10% of the order for a delivery from the restaurant and from the diner. So that depends, right? They could do many deliveries in an hour. That's their choice. They turn on their app and they can start getting deliveries. So it's not an hourly rate. It's 10% of the delivery from the restaurant and 10% from the diner and 100% of the tips.
So if someone just ordered a large order of fries, which certainly wouldn't be cost efficient given how much with all these delivery fees, but if that was the case, they would just get 10% of.
No, we have a small order fee for that reason, because we have, you know, we need to protect the drivers. So it is per order, but we do have a small order fee because they need, you know, to make sure that they can get a reasonable wage for that. And then there are some time and distance measures added as well.
Yeah, I can appreciate all that. And I won't take too much time. I really appreciate the chair allowing me to go out of order. And I want to respect my colleagues for their patience and generosity. I am, again, concerned about the cost to consumer, the cost to small business owners. You know, from, I think, the article that Councillor O'Malley referenced, they're talking about 49% fees, you know, compared to what it would cost if we were able to sit down in a restaurant. And I think moving forward, given we know our restaurants will not open in the same way that they were open pre-COVID. We know right now we're having conversations about dining out only, maybe takeout only, you know, all these physical distancing. So clearly takeout is going to be part of the future. And I worry when the third-party fees are so high, you know, the restaurant has the only way to make it sustainable is to pass that fee on to someone else. And then that goes on to the consumer. So it's bad. It can be bad for consumer. It can be bad for that small business owner. I have small business owners who are in real time now writing me, emailing me, calling my office, and they want to see some sort of cap. So I would be interested in your response to that. And if there are other panelists who could respond, that would be fine as well. And then I want to sit back and respect that my colleagues and the chair allowed me to jump the line. And hopefully after my 2 o'clock, I can jump back onto this Zoom if it's still going on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this is on fees. I'd be interested in a response on a cap on fees, because I have small business owners in my district right now who say that's what they need to be sustainable, that without some sort of cap, these fees are going to drive them out of business. So I'm interested in a response from you as well as any other panelists. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and start if that's all right. And I did submit testimony, which does explain our business more thoroughly, but I'll hit on a few highlights. Again, our services for restaurants are optional, right? We have a lot of diners that go to restaurants directly, call them, you know, and order and pick up or use the restaurant's delivery services. So while our services are optional, the cost of running our business is not. Conducting background checks on drivers costs money. Running customer service on behalf of drivers, diners, and restaurants costs money. Developing and updating our technology costs money. The fraud protection and the 10 million annual losses is real costs. So a cap on commissions will transfer these costs onto the backs of small business owners. And I think it was Councillor Flynn who said he didn't care about Google's bottom line. Well, neither do I, but they sure make sure we pay them. So if we have to pay them, you know, I'd love to not be able to do that. You know, if they would give us a break, but our costs are real. You know, no one is doing background checks for drivers for free. You know, I doubt Cisco and Aramark are giving away their food to restaurants. So these are real costs to us. We're a public company. You can see our financials. You can see the losses we incurred. So it's the assumption that businesses would get the same benefit for less money is just not true.
Thank you for that. I'd like to move on now to, first, I would like to acknowledge that we have been joined by Bob Luce of Massachusetts Restaurants Association. And I also would like to give an opportunity to Mr. Shaw to speak. I know that he has been quietly waiting impatiently. So Mr. Shaw, you now have the floor. And then I'll go back to my colleagues.
Thank you.
Yep. 5 minutes or less, please.
So when Grubhub or DoorDash comes to a restaurant, their explanation for why they're charging a 25 or 30% fee, well, if it's a 10% delivery fee, it's a 17% is the minimum marketing fee that Grubhub charges. So that's 27% is the minimum, according to Grubhub, that they'll charge a restaurant. And their rationale for why that pay for restaurants, they're saying that smart sales for restaurants. They're incremental sales on the basis, restaurant, a whole bunch of sales for sit-down diners or takeout, and then the delivery sales are just incremental sales. And we've already got our workers there. We've already got the lights on. We've already paid the rent. And so our incremental costs for these incremental sales are just 40, 50%. For the cost of the goods and a few other additional costs. And so when we're getting 70% of the revenue, according to the delivery companies, when they come meet with you to try to talk you into coming onto their app to begin with, you're going to make out great because you're getting 70% of the revenue, but your incremental costs are only 40, 45, 50%. The problem with that is that it's not that our incremental costs are 40 or 45%. Our incremental costs are 80, 85, or 90%. And so when we're getting 70% of the revenue of our meals, we're losing 15 or 20% on every one of those delivery orders. And so when the delivery companies say having sort of lower delivery fees will mean that customers are going to have to pay more and you'll have fewer orders. I would rather have fewer orders and make money on every order than lose money on every order and have lots of those orders. This isn't the sort of, it's not a system that is sustainable on the part of restaurants. There may be an issue between the split between what consumers pay and user consumers pay and what restaurants pay, but it is not feasible for restaurants to receive 70% for a meal when the delivery amount of delivery is not going to be 25 or 30 or 40%. For me right now, it's 72%. And having to pay the delivery companies 18 or 20% of my total revenue just makes restaurant not viable. There has to be an acknowledgement that the way the industry has set up the pricing structure to restaurants and the pricing structure to consumers is no longer viable for restaurants. It doesn't make restaurants be able to sort of sustain their business when they're only receiving 70% of the sale of an order.
Your testimony was very compelling. I'm going to now move on to the rest of my councillor colleagues, and Ms. Healy, when we move back to some questions, if you are interested in responding to Mr. Shaw, you may incorporate your response then. So I'm moving on now to Councillor Asabi George. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for your participation today and the information that's been shared. I am curious, Ms. Healy, if restaurants have the opportunity to negotiate fees at all during the process of signing up for either a contract, a regular business contract, or for one of the specials?
Yes, we have dedicated account advisors that work with restaurants on on the menu of services and negotiate that package for them.
And do you have the ability to share a breakdown in the types of restaurants that get certain percentage deals off? I've participated in the past in like the Groupons and the Living Social deals, and there's always that opportunity to negotiate. But I have found that businesses that have either access to the technical assistance or sort of have the additional capacity to do that negotiation, they get to do it. So I am curious whether it's the large chain restaurants that have a greater capacity to negotiate versus some of the small mom and pops in our neighborhoods.
Large chains do have market power, and I think we're one vendor for them. They obviously have a marketing budget and they don't need us to do as much marketing for them as some of the independents, given their ability to market on TV and other things like that. But they're a very small part of our business. You know, our business and our services that we provide. For example, we came up with a tool called Ultimate, which is a tablet so that mom and pop restaurants can have the same type of ordering service, point of sale system that a Panera or, you know, a Dunkin' Donuts has, because they can't compete on that. You know, they can't afford the same technology. So Grubhub offered them, again, this is something that they can choose to have, that gives a mom and pop the ability to track orders and have diners track orders in a way that a chain has. So we only benefit by being able to provide the services that large companies get to independent restaurants.
And then some of that technology, restaurants that have those, the tablets, are they purchasing them from you? Or are they leasing them from you? Or?
No, are you talking about when they first come on the platform?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is free to them. So we incur, it's one of our costs. We incur the cost of onboarding new restaurants, providing them the tablet, the technology, uploading menus. We have photographers that we use locally for menus. And that's a different model than some of our competitors. And so, you know, one of the comments I made when I started was restaurants can join the platform for free. They get all of their welcome kit, the tablet, all of that technology. And if we drive orders to them, then we charge a fee. Some of our competitors charge an onboarding fee. You know, it's a different business model, which is another reason why, you know, one size fits all approach to these different businesses isn't workable.
All right, that's it for me, Madam Chair. Thank you. I look forward to hearing public testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Asabi-George. Before I move on to Councillor Bach, I'd like to give Mr. Bob Luce an opportunity to make some comments. Please join the conversation. You will probably need to unmute yourself.
Not me. You had me muted. Actually, Steve Clark will make our testimony if I could ask that way. I just happened to jump in because I'm multitasking, to be honest with you. So.
Okay. Steve.
Just taking a guess, Steve might be in the waiting room under attendees. There's a Megan Clark that might be.
Yeah, that would be it.
Okay. Well, I am having a moment here. Can someone let him in, or am I the only one in control of the situation here?
No, he's in now.
Steve, welcome.
Good afternoon, Councillor. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for joining us. Sorry about the technical difficulty.
No, I'm just catching up on the technical difficulties right now, and I got my video and I'm speaking, and we are ready to roll. Good afternoon, Chairman Mejia and members of the council. My name is Stephen Clark, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. Thank you for taking the time to schedule today's hearing regarding the important issue of transparency and fees associated with third-party delivery companies. As I'm sure you are aware, restaurants have been devastated by the COVID pandemic. On March 16th, our industry was stopped in its tracks. All sit-down restaurant dining rooms are closed. In a recent survey, 46% of restaurants report not being open at all. hundreds of thousands of employees have been furloughed or laid off. Recent estimates speculate that 30 to 40% of restaurants may be closed for good. While restaurants have been allowed and encouraged to offer takeout and delivery, however, for many, that is easier said than done. Under normal circumstances, takeout and delivery account for less than 20% of sales at most restaurants, and there are those operations with no history of takeout. It's hard to build a platform from scratch. Please allow me to read an email that we received back in January, prior to any COVID-related closures. I will remove all references to specific companies in the course of this email. Dear MRA, and we hear from restaurants every day. We have daily communications, we have roundtables, we have conversations, we have a pretty robust membership across the city of Boston and the Commonwealth of Mass. Dear MRA, it has come to my attention that XYZ delivery company has set up a website without our permission. There is also the same setup for our sister restaurant in another town. The concept is someone finds our restaurant on their site and orders from an abbreviated menu which they have selected. A driver comes to the restaurant and shows our hostess the order on his or her phone, pays with a credit card, and has the logo of the third-party delivery company. I was asked for a contact number. I spoke to a representative who claimed I was being upset and tried to tell me it was someone close to me who set up this account. I asked who the person was from my restaurant who signed the contract. She proceeded to name a person who has never been employed in my restaurant, nor have we ever had anyone close to that name. The representative hung up on me after I asked her to email me the contract. We do not have any current or prior relationship, and they set up a dummy website with an abbreviated menu. There's no transparency to the customer, and they are marketing items from an old menu. All menu prices were inflated by at least $1.50. The steak tips ordered in the picture does not offer a temperature. The gentleman who came in to place the order made no reference to allergen concerns. My staff is required to be trained in allergen awareness, and any issue that arises from my restaurant's reputation is at stake, and I don't even know who the customer is. I've experienced issues with another third-party company last year. ABC Company, which is a different third-party company than the one in the previous story, kept emailing me DocuSigns hoping someone would click the agreement box, bounding us to a contract. As you can see, that's the end of the email. As you can see, prior to the pandemic, third-party delivery companies were a source of frustration for our industry, with many of these delivery platforms charging up to the 30% commission on individual orders. Due to the current situation, regulating these platforms with increased scrutiny is more important than ever. As restaurants look for new ways to survive, with increased takeout and delivery, third-party delivery companies are going to play a prominent role. That prominent role will need to be increased regulation from government. There needs to be two different paths here, with third-party regulations coming and being a partner with restaurants, but there also needs to be more regulation. I did share a letter with each of the city councilors, so I won't expand on that beyond what was included in that letter, but I want to thank you for allowing me to testify today. And on behalf of the Mass Restaurant Association, we thank all the councilors that have introduced this ordinance, and also for all the councilors that are paying attention today on the hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. I would have to congratulate you. You kept that under 5 minutes. Good job. Then I'm going to call on you next because I know you're a good timekeeper. Thank you. Thank you. Great job. I'm going to move on to my colleagues next in line, as we have Councillor Bach. You have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Mejia. I have a question each, I think, right now for Amy and then for Stephen. So Amy, on your side, I was wondering, I had mentioned in my opening remarks an interest in having transparency around the total set of fees that are being charged. And I don't just mean, you talked about, right, there's what you're charging the consumer, but I think that for people to understand, oh, this is the percentage that overall is going to the third-party delivery company of this order, is a relevant piece of information for the consumer to make up their own mind on the basis of. And I'm curious whether that's something that you all have considered doing and would be open to doing.
We have talked to cities about that, and no, we don't, and I'll tell you why. The terms of our business agreement between Grubhub and the restaurant is an agreement that two businesses willingly entered. So to disclose those terms to consumers is not providing the transparency that people think. Again, our business models are different. Grubhub doesn't charge to go onto the platform. So we eat a lot of upfront costs. So we might have different costs on the back end. Some of our competitors have get money from restaurants to onboard them. So they might have different costs. It's just not gonna, it's not an apples to apples comparison. On the surface, it sounds great, but it's just not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, I guess I would submit that I think that there are ways to normalize those things to make it more apples to apples. And I also think that in general, we try to, you know, err on the side of providing consumers with information, and then, yeah, they have to make sense of it. I think, you know, to the point of kind of here we are in a market, having people understand what the different structures are between the competitors, I think would help them make intelligent market decisions. But it's just an opinion of mine.
Yeah, no, for sure. And certainly there's plenty of diners in Boston that love our service or we wouldn't exist, right? I have these meetings with counselors all over the country and they tell me, oh, you know, all my kids use your service or all my friends or relatives. This business came to be because diners wanted a better way to order food. They weren't happy with the old model of screaming their credit card into a crowded lobby where dozens of people were waiting and having their credit card number written on a bag in the example I used, like their favorite restaurants being saved in their account. So you know, the millions of diners that use our service, you know, tell us, hey, we like this feature, change this, and we're constantly updating the site. But you know, I want to be clear about that. You know, and they have an option to go directly to the restaurant, of course, at any time.
And my question for you, Mr. Clark, is just, I mean, I can imagine some, I think we're all pretty sympathetic to the restaurant situation right now, but I can imagine somebody saying, well, hang on, I've heard from the MRA, I've heard from John Shaw, like these are just not, you know, not helpful platforms for the restaurants. So then the question is, why are restaurants signing up for them?
Well, I think unfortunately let me choose the right word. It's a necessary evil, and I'm certainly not meaning to call it an evil. It's a double-edged sword, might be a better term to use. Whereas they have to be on the platform to be able to deliver food to their customers, but at the same time they're held hostage by the different fees and lack of transparency that's associated with the platform. Because as Amy has articulated, you know, they do a good job with certain issues with marketing and getting the product out there. So it's a double-edged sword for the restaurant industry.
Yeah. And I think the comment I wanted to make, how much time do I have, Madam Chair?
You have 57 seconds.
Okay, so a quick comment, and if either of you have a comment, great, and otherwise not. It's just, I mean, I think the bigger picture thing we're dealing with here, right, is that you have this, there's a whole direction that lots of our industries are going, where if Grubhub or DoorDash or whatever were just like a service for providing you with delivery drivers, right? Restaurants would evaluate the different costs of them and hire one of them, and it'd be like a pool of delivery drivers, right? But what's actually happening is that there are these network effects that basically structure something where it becomes more and more impossible not to participate in a sort of information monopoly in order to get your restaurant in front of people's eyeballs, right? And that's why it's not an option for someone who wants to drive a car to just hang out their shingle and be like, oh, I'll be a taxi driver or an Uber driver right now. It's like if they're a taxi driver, they've got no fares. If they're an Uber driver, they've got many. Same thing going on, right? And I think part of what the problem is that really shifts the power in that relationship between two businesses that you referenced, Ms. Healy, because there is this kind of like access to the consumer that's being throttled there. And while there's some competition, I think all of these businesses are built on the hope that eventually there won't be, and that somebody will win this delivery war. And so I think that's really what we're pushing back on here. And what we need to be pushing back on is the question of whether this kind of model, where you end up with a sort of universal fee run by a delivery company and everybody's kind of tilling their, the serfs tilling their little corner is really what makes sense going forward for the industry. So I do think there's like a pretty big picture question here. But I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I've run over my time.
It's okay. Councillor Bach, as much as I do that to you, I think this is a good way to pay me back. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Really appreciate it. I am now going to recognize Councillor Breeden. You now have the floor.
Got it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Put my picture on. Thank you. I have to say, the more I read about this situation with third-party delivery services, the more disturbed I become, especially in relation to some very companies in setting up websites and ghost telephone numbers for businesses. They assert themselves as a third party action and then extortionate fees. It seems predatory and very, very unfair to offer a delivery service and then take on such excessive back-end fees that many businesses may not actually have signed up for. So I'm very concerned and like to know more. I really feel it is being rectified. Thank you. If the restaurant, if Stephen could speak to his experience a little more, I'm really concerned that I want to get the picture, an accurate picture from firsthand from a restaurateur.
So the chair will recognize Stephen, and then I know that Ms. Healy is interested in also responding. So, but I'd like to go first to Stephen, if you will.
So I would personally defer to John and the other restaurateurs that have signed up to testify to talk about their individual experience. I can only relay on behalf of the association the broad conversations we've had. But one perfect example is we had a roundtable conversation back in January with 25 operators around the table, and one operator brought up that they had found that their website had been ghosted, and everyone around the table Googled their restaurant, and 12 out of 20 attendees had also had ghosted websites that they found on Google that they didn't even know existed. So this is happening every time that this issue gets brought up. There are operators that are realizing that this is happening out there and they don't even know it. And so the orders that are being generated from those websites, again, they're having no control over it. And so not only is the restaurant going to be in jeopardy by not controlling what the order is, but there's very real allergen concerns. Restaurants are one of the most regulated industries out there besides healthcare, and we take care every day to serve our customers safely, and those protocols aren't being followed when someone else is ordering on your behalf and then becomes the main contact between the customer with your product, but you don't even know that that product's being sold.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. I know, Amy, you posted in the chat room that you would like to answer some of these questions. We have a minute and 52
Sure.
seconds.
Thank you so much. I wanted to respond to Mr. Clark's comments about that practice. We agree. And we'd love to work with the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. That is not an optimal practice. It is not an optimal experience for the restaurant or the diner. Grubhub did not participate in that practice until very recently, when we felt we were at a competitive disadvantage because we weren't putting restaurants up on the platform. Many of the restaurants that get orders through that practice like it and then become partners. But we agree, we fundamentally agree. And again, I'd love to work with him on, maybe there's a solution out there, but absolutely agree.
Thank you. Councillor Breeden, any other questions or comments that you'd like to, you still have a minute left. Want to honor that? Or we're good?
I'm good for now.
Okay, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that we are hoping to move through our first round of questions and moving then also to public testimony. So I'd like to recognize my counselor, who is my district counselor, and colleague, Councillor Campbell. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Council Mejia, and thank you to the restaurant owners and Steve and others who had emailed us about this issue. And thank you to the makers for calling for the hearing. And Caitlin, thank you for participating. And Amy, thank you as well. Learning a lot, and many of my questions were asked and answered. I think, you know, the conversation at moments is a bit unsettling in that, you know, we often have these conversations, but then of course, I think all of my council colleagues would agree, want to turn it into action where we either cap the fees or something happens where it benefits the restaurants who are struggling right now in the midst of COVID-19 or the consumer. So I think my question is really directed, I think, to Amy, which is, I'll start with a comment and then the question. This idea of sort of running businesses on a fee model, right? Reminds me of the banking system, you know, adopted by, like, you know, Asian banks, that instead of just here's, you know, $10 and I'll give you a product, here's $10. It's now here's 10, you know, here's the product, it's $10 plus some fee. Banks are doing it, and more companies are doing it to make a profit. And at some point, the fees sort of get out of control. So I think transparency is absolutely key, so people have an understanding in lay terms as to what they're getting into. And I won't go down that line of questioning because Councillor Bach, I thought, did a really great job along with other colleagues. But I'm just curious to hear from you, Amy, a little bit more on, and maybe I missed this because I had to sign on late due to another obligation. What does seem sort of reasonable, fair, based on what business owners and consumers are saying with respect to these costs and fees, from your perspective? And I get you have obviously folks who at your company are making decisions based on their bottom line, but just sort of taking a step back and responding to some of what Stephen and others were saying, what seems reasonable is sort of one of my questions. And I apologize if you hear, that's my baby Aiden in the background.
No problem. And thank you for that. So we're always looking at, you know, our business, obviously, and what's the best way that we can support restaurants. And as I mentioned early, you know, we're a publicly traded company, so our financials are open for anyone to see. And we announced that all profits would be for the second quarter would be reinvested in programs to support driving business to restaurants. So that's what we believe is going to be most helpful from what we hear from our restaurant partners. They need business, they need volume. We're putting tens of millions of dollars into free money to restaurants. You know, one program is if a diner orders $30, Grubhub will pay for $10 of it. To drive more orders, to drive more volume to restaurants. So that's what we believe is the most beneficial for restaurants.
Thank you. And I'd be curious to hear from John or Stephen, their perspective on what you just said, you know, driving profits to certain initiatives versus doing it a little bit differently. Because what I was hearing from John is that businesses, this is not sustainable for the business owner, right? For the small business owner. So curious, instead of looking at those profits and driving them somewhere, what else might you guys do to sort of make it more useful from their perspective or more reasonable from their perspective?
Thank you. And as I mentioned,
I think that question was that question for John?
Yeah, John.
Could I comment on that, please?
Yes, it's for you,
Yes.
John.
Yeah. So I just want to just describe the original program that Grubhub initiated right after March 16th was called Support for Supper. And in that program, they did exactly what Ms. Healy said. For an order of $30 or more, they would give the consumer $10 off, but the restaurant had to pay that $10. And so for a $30 order, we would pay 30% or $9 to Grubhub. We would give $10 off to the consumer, and we would get $11 for a $30 order. That's 37%. It was only after there was just an outpouring of sort of outrage about this support for supper program, which Grubhub sort of announced to great fanfare that it was supporting restaurants, when now we were getting 37% of the ticket, that they then finally came back with where they would say, you can have $250, so you could do 25 of these $10 off. But that was only a response after there was a month or 6 weeks of outrage about the support for supper program that Grubhub had initiated. One other thing I just wanted to sort of point out, Grubhub is a publicly traded company, and their first quarter report was available. And in their first quarter earnings report, Grubhub stated that the first quarter, that for now, and this is a quote, for now, COVID-19 is a net tailwind for our growth metrics. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm pretty sure it means that COVID-19 has been a godsend for the bottom line of, all the delivery companies, not just Grubhub.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John. In the interest of time,
Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
No, thank you, Councilor Campbell. I just really want to be super mindful that we do have a public testimony, and we have David Doyle, who is waiting in the queue for public testimony, and I want to give him an opportunity to do so. David, if you are with us still, we'd like to invite you to speak, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm not sure my my audio's, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, my video may not be working, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts. And thank you, Councillor O'Malley, and all the others who are part of this, attempt to sort of air this issue. I'm co-owner of 3 Jamaica Plain restaurants, and proud to say that we have never actually relied on delivery much at all. Delivery for us is probably less than 5% at all the 3 restaurants I'm involved in, and for me that means that we have very strong neighborhood support for direct dine-in operations. That puts us at extreme risk during this crisis, because we have no background, we have no experience with delivery because we haven't needed to. And in answer to Councillor Bach's question about, why would restaurants enter into these arrangements? From my point of view, one of the reasons we haven't is because it doesn't make financial sense. It's just too much money per order to go to a delivery, to go to an organization that, for my opinion, is not part of our success whatsoever. So Grubhub doesn't really offer me much of anything. We don't need that. I personally don't feel like we need the marketing piece that they offer. I'm more interested in actually a low-cost delivery service that will actually help us survive the next 6 to 8 months, because we're in the unfortunate position of not being able to rely on dine-in revenue for a good chunk of time to come. The 3 restaurants I'm involved in are very small, with less than 60 seat capacity. So if you knock out half of that for an unknown amount of time, we have no possibility of staying above water. So I guess in short, I would say that this problem, in my opinion, very much predates COVID. I think if we don't cap those delivery fees, restaurants like myself, the restaurants I'm involved in, will shy away from using delivery services because it just makes no financial sense. That leaves us with trying to figure out how to survive on our own. So we're talking about in-house delivery. Obviously, there are problems with that. But why would I choose to have a relationship with Grubhub if it makes me no money? And I think with dine-in revenue out the window for a good chunk of time, we're going to rely on local pickup for our takeout business. And that's a big unknown, but that's probably the route we're going to go unless we have a cap in fees, and then we would, that would make sense for us to give that a try.
Yeah, thank you, David, for for your testimony. We really do appreciate it. And I did let you speak a few seconds after the 2-minute mark, but I would also like to say you did a good job keeping it within some time. I would also just like to, in the interest of time, would like to ask my colleagues, we'd like to move on to the second round of questions. If my colleagues have questions or comments that they would like to share, I'm asking you to please raise your little blue hand, and we will call you in the order that I have here listed. I see one blue hand. For those who are tuning in, the blue hands is just a little icon, not that the actual. And I have Kenzie, Matt, and anyone else. I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger so I can see all the little blue hands. So right now it's everybody. Okay. Everybody wants to have a question. Okay, I have 3 blue hands. We're going to start off in the order of the first hand that I saw. I'm going to go to Councillor O'Malley. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Healy, you had said earlier in this, I think in response to Councillor Bach, that plenty of diners love our service. I would perhaps quibble with that a bit and say plenty of diners love the restaurants and use the service as a means of getting the food from there. I wanted to thank Steve Clark for bringing up a point which is going to sort of be part of my second round of questioning, which I'll get to in a moment. But one question or one note, in the earlier round of questioning, I talked about the Panda Express order from the New York Times study. The thing I neglected to mention that the price for the family feast, which was sort of the bit price, the starting point in addition to delivery fees and other things, was $39. Was the cost at the restaurant to pick up the family feast was $39 at a Panda Express. It was in the cost, the base price of that was increased to $47.10 for Grubhub, $47.10 to DoorDash, $44.85 to Postmates, and $47.10 to Uber Eats. So that's obviously, and there's nothing illegal about this, but many of these third-party vendors do charge more just than you would get it off the menu. Now, what's troubling about that, and this is to Stephen Clark's point, is that there's an article from 4 months ago, January 30th, from theverge.com. Grubhub's new growth hack is listing restaurants that don't agree to be listed. Grubhub has a new growth hacking strategy that includes creating a restaurant listing on its platform for places. This is what Steve was talking about. And Ms. Healy, you acknowledge that is a practice that Grubhub is doing?
Ms. Healy, that question is for you.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, to my comments earlier, to Mr. Clark, we agree with him. We don't like that practice either. We were the
So why don't you stop doing it?
Well, we're looking at it. Absolutely, our competitors do it, and in order to stay competitive, it's something that we started doing at the tail end of last year. So I'd love to. I'll reiterate. I'd love to work with Mr. Clark, and we agree that it's not the best experience. A lot of our restaurants are new to the platform through that program. They actually do like that they were able to get orders, but I agree.
And is there but there may be some restaurants, particularly I'm thinking immigrant-owned restaurants, of which we have many in Boston, where they may not even know that a vendor like Grubhub is doing pickup and delivery for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
I mean, that's so I would just,
the article in front of you. I'll reiterate again, happy to work with Massachusetts Restaurant Association on alternatives.
Well, I think the alternative is not doing it because it is a duplicitous practice. And the fact that you're charging more for a meal and setting up an online portal for restaurants that may not even know about it, that's just very troubling.
I hear you. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you hear me. I hope we can do something about it. You said, and I wrote it down, so I believe I have your quote directly, that all profits from the second quarter would go to supporting driving businesses back to restaurants. Is that correct?
I will get the exact quote from our investor relations letter. It's in a publicly, it's on our website.
That's the gist of it. I mean, that's the gist of it. And it's a good thing. I want to be clear. That's a good thing. And we appreciate that, which is why capping the delivery fees now, during this time when restaurants don't have an opportunity, you've said that some restaurants can opt out because it's too expensive, but others may not. You hear about the ones that typically have in-house diners that may not have the bandwidth to do it. By capping the high fees now, you can absolutely support driving businesses back to restaurants, because you will help support these restaurants during this incredibly difficult time, knowing that when we open up, we're going to have limited capacities. One of your main competitors, DoorDash, said about 3 weeks ago that they were voluntarily cutting their own fees by 50%. How can they do that and you say that it's unsustainable for your business practice?
DoorDash is stopping that practice in a few days. So we have chosen to do other things, like pump tens of millions of dollars into direct restaurant relief to drive orders. We deferred fees at the beginning of the pandemic that we still have not collected. So again, we are not apples to apples companies. DoorDash makes business decisions that are best for them, and Grubhub does the same.
New York City recently capped their fees at, I believe it was 15%. Is Grubhub going to leave business in New York City because of that cap?
We haven't determined how we're going to respond to that cap yet.
Are you actually considering leaving the New York City, a city of 12 million?
I did not say that. I did not say that.
All right. Well, if it's good enough for New York City, Madam Chair, and to my colleagues, I think it's good enough.
It's not law yet.
I'm sorry, Ms. Healy, I have the floor. At the conclusion of this hearing, I look forward, or I would urge you, Madam Chair, and my colleagues to perhaps transition this to a working session where we can begin drafting what an ordinance would look like to cap these fees. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. It's always great to see you in action. In the best interest of time, I really want to be super mindful. We have 5 more minutes. And I know we've just been joined by Councillor Lydia Edwards, and wanted to just give her an opportunity to ask a question or make a quick remark. And then I'm going to move on to Councillor Bach. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you so much, Councillor Mejia. I do appreciate this, and I wanted to apologize to my colleagues for not being able to get on a little earlier. I got the gist and the fire from my my colleague O'Malley, so I will just say this: I will watch the tape. I will understand exactly what the issues are to make sure that we are clear on the best way forward for our small businesses. And that's why I'm on this, is because many of the immigrant-owned small businesses and many of the small businesses are in East Boston, and also the North End is in my district. That's our little Italy. Their health and their survival means a lot to me. So what I don't want is for any industry to be making more than their fair share in this moment while other people are struggling. What I do want is that if there are people who are creative enough to come up with ways to allow for our businesses to thrive, I want to support them. But I'm going to watch this tape, because Councillor O'Malley, I do trust your gut and I trust your vision on how to do things. And of course, if there's an ordinance filed, it'll be coming to my committee. So I would look forward to having this conversation further on. And thank you so much, Chairwoman Mejia, for the acknowledgement. And I do apologize for being late today.
No, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I now recognize Councillor Bach. You now have the floor.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll be very quick. It's really a question for the MRA, for Steve. I'm just wondering if the Restaurant Association has thought at all about partnering. I mean, it seems to me like, you know, the ideal solution in this pandemic would be some kind of delivery driver co-op that, you know, took care of paying for the drivers, you know, wages and needs, but then, you know, kind of disaggregated from these giant platforms. I mean, it's still tricky because, as I said before, the network effects are what they are. But I think at least within Boston and Cambridge, I could imagine us pushing as an ecosystem towards those alternatives, but you still have to have an alternative infrastructure. So I just wonder if there's been any conversation about pooling delivery driver resources in a restaurant-led way.
I don't believe that that hasn't happened yet. I mean, we at the association, we are open to any partnerships that are out there and anything that's going to make it easier for restaurants to get on the other side of this. And so anything that we can do, we will. But to my knowledge, nothing has been considered on that specifically on a driver pool. But there's always been collaborations amongst the restaurant community with collaborating with employees and what have you. But in terms of a driver base, that's not something we have done. But we would absolutely work with the different third-party delivery companies out there if that's something we could accomplish.
Great. Yeah. No, I'll defer. I know my colleague, Councillor Flynn, who is one of the makers of this, is waiting. So I just want to thank everybody so much for raising this important issue today. Thanks, Councillor Mejia.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Councillor Flynn, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia, and want to say thank you to the Mass Restaurant Association, to Steve and to Bob for being here. I also want to say thank you to Amy as well for testifying. She's think of this, she's the only person that came here from one of the 4 delivery businesses to face the fire, face the tough questions. The other ones hid behind the computer and didn't want to engage in this topic and didn't want to engage in the subject. It probably shows you the disrespect those other companies have for the residents of Boston, in my opinion. But when we do have a working session, I do expect them to be at the table and talking about solutions to the problem. San Francisco, New York, Baltimore, Cambridge have a cap. Boston desperately needs a cap. We need a cap because our restaurants play an integral part in our community, in our neighborhood. They're our neighbors. They coach Little League. They're active in PTA. And they're involved in the community in so many different ways in different nonprofits. When someone's on the ground and knocked out, the last thing you want to do is keep them on the ground. We want to lend a helping hand to the restaurants and get them back up on the feet. We don't need delivery companies to put their foot on someone's neck to keep them on the ground. So this is about fairness to the residents of Boston and to the employees of these restaurants. Treat everybody fairly and treat everybody with respect. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flaherty, you now have the floor, and then followed by Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just by way of wrap up, the previous speaker said it best, and appreciate the woman's patience, obviously, but also just testament to her willingness to come forward and to participate in the hearing. So I want to thank her for being part of the hearing. And while others, competitors mailed it in, literally sending in emails, and a little distasteful that folks didn't want to come forward and be part of the solution. So I know that she took some hits and some punches today, but nonetheless, the common goal here is, as Councilor Flynn said, is that, a lot of folks are suffering. We got a shared responsibility here to help get food to people that need it, to help our restaurants and our service industry get back on their feet, which obviously includes our delivery. And I understand the added value that restaurants have. They could be doing the delivery themselves, but they incur the cost, maintenance, repair, fees, and liability insurance, et cetera. So that's not lost on this discussion. Just trying to strike a balance as to what's fair and what's reasonable, and making sure that the whole process is transparent so that the customer doesn't take their frustration out on the restaurant while the restaurant's trying to get on their feet, and also making sure that restaurants are allowed to get on their feet and be able to use the delivery services. So all points well said and well taken today. Disappointing that we didn't see some more folks from the industry participating, but at least kudos to you to being here and participating, and on behalf of your company having the fortitude to take some of these tough questions and to be part of the solution. We're looking for a solution between industry leaders and stakeholders, and we really probably shouldn't even be in this space, but we're here because we were brought here by members of the public who felt that the fees were a little over the top, and they felt that some folks were taking advantage of people, very much like we're starting to see in some of our supermarkets and in stores, that the prices and the price gouging is going through the roof, and that's going to be the next avenue that we'll probably have to address. But again, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to my co-sponsors on this. Thanks to industry leaders, the restaurant group, Bob and his team for participating, and look forward to whether it's a working session or what the next steps are. But we need to restore some fairness and some reasonableness to this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I am now going to recognize Councilor Campbell. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the makers again. And thank you for those who participated in today's hearing, all of you. And I agree with Councilor Flaherty. It's always disappointing when we don't have certain perspectives at the table when trying to be thoughtful and putting forth solutions, an ordinance or policy ideas. So thank you to everyone for participating. I absolutely echo all of my colleagues in terms of all small businesses. We all, I think, agree they are extremely valuable, not just because they're our neighbors and they produce good food or good products. They employ our residents. They build wealth in our communities, and especially in communities of color, which I largely represent, Dorchester and Mattapan. They're essential, and they're going to be essential to our recovery and our sustainability going forward. So I think this is one piece of the puzzle that has to be addressed now and in the future. And so I look forward to continuing the conversation and being a part of the solution to find a path forward that works for everyone. And I also want to thank the business owners who participated today to offer their perspective and their thoughts. The back and forth is always helpful. And I appreciated John's comments. I didn't get to say this in my last time around, that, on the one hand, you got companies who are taking their profits and doing certain things according to, making these decisions in the way in which serves them. But maybe instead of doing it at the end in terms of taking the profits and reinvesting them in some initiative, they start at the beginning talking to business owners and say, okay, maybe we cut our fees and maybe our profit looks a little different. I don't know, but I think John's perspective on some of these initiatives not working, and it shouldn't take all of us sort of having to mobilize over a period of months to get companies to do different or do better by these small business owners. So I really hope that this is an opportunity for us to do something to protect them. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell. So without any further ado, I don't see any other blue hands raised. I just would like to say that I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to learn and listen to all sides. I'm really concerned about the fees as well as some of the situation that Councilor O'Malley highlighted in regards to some folks not even knowing that they were being promoted in this platform. I think we have a lot of work to do, and I do appreciate the dialogue and look forward to the next steps. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the public and the panelists for their testimony. And I will be drawing this hearing to a close with my fake gavel, making sure that we all know that this hearing has been adjourned. Thank you so much for participating, and we'll be following up soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thanks, everybody. Good job, Madam Chair.
Well, please.
Good job. Happy to participate in your very first hearing as chairwoman.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Congratulations, Julia. Congratulations.
Thank you. You just told me about this on Monday. I had to fit this into my life, so I'm glad that it all worked out. Thank you.
Natural.
Good work.
You guys, can I say one thing?
Yes, John.
For you, sort of doing this sooner rather than later. I can't tell you how important that is. It's just, the fact that DoorDash reduced their fees from April 13th until May 31st, it's not a few days, it's going on for another 3 weeks. But that mattered about $10,000 to me in just those 6 weeks from one of the 4 delivery companies. It just, the sort of the magnitude of this as an issue, I can't sort of emphasize it enough. And it's going to go on for a long time. It is not going to, as a big issue, it's not going to end anytime soon. So I hope you do this as expeditiously as government can work.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you. We'll definitely follow up and
Thanks.
move everything along. Thank you so much. Okay, bye, guys. See you at 3 o'clock. Okay, bye.